Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. I just flew in yesterday from a quick vacation my wife and I took. We were gone for about 2 weeks altogether. Our kids are out of school right now, so we sent them to hang out with my parents in Washington State. And while they were gone, we thought, well, we should take a vacation of our own, and so we did just that. Now, one of the things I like to do when I take a trip like this is to just kind of come back and think about it and reassess what it means for the channel, specifically when it comes to like what handhelds did I bring and why, but then also it just kind of gives me a new perspective on the things that I want to work on when I get back. And so in this video, we're going to do 3 different things. Number 1, we're going to talk about where I went and why. And of course, I'm going to have timestamps down below if you don't want to hear any of that stuff. But then also I'm going to talk about what I brought, in terms of gaming devices and whatnot, and how that all played out. And then finally, I'm going to talk about all the things that arrived while I was gone and the things I plan on working on in the next few weeks. I'm going to show off every single one and give you an opportunity to say which one you would prefer that I work on first. All things considered, this is probably going to be a pretty low-key video. I'm really going to just talk about the practical example of using some of these devices while traveling. And so without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump in. So to get started, let's talk about where I went and why. And I've mentioned it before, but I'm retired military. I was in the Navy for 22 years. One of the things I haven't said before is what I did in the military. So I was a translator or a linguist. And one of the languages that I had learned was Indonesian. And so when my wife and I were thinking about where we wanted to go on vacation, the first thing that popped into my mind was Indonesia. I hadn't really gone there on vacation before, and so it just seemed like a really great way to have a practical experience with using that language that I had learned about 20 plus years ago. And so that idea just kind of formed our entire vacation. We started by going to Bali first because that's a tourist destination. We thought it'd be a good way to just kind of get our feet wet with the country itself. My wife doesn't speak Indonesian at all, and so we thought it would be a good way to acclimate to the entire country. And so we ended up spending about 4 or 5 days there altogether. We had a great time. Now, a lot of people associate Bali with like the beaches and stuff like that. We didn't do that. We live in Hawaii. We have beaches here all the time. And so instead, we decided to go to the center of the island in a city called Ubud. And this is also a bit of a tourist destination, but more on the cultural side. So we did things like checking out traditional dances and folklore, but then also going to like art museums and of course testing out the food. That's probably our number 1 reason why we were there. And I got to say that I loved speaking the language as well. It was one of those things where I never got tired of blowing people's minds when I would just start speaking in Indonesian, especially when I was trying to talk about prices on the open air market, because they're like a bargaining culture. And so it was just a lot of fun to just whip that out and they'd be like, oh. So we did that for quite a bit of time there while we were in Ubud, and yeah, we had a great time in Bali. After that, we went to a different island. We went to Java. This is the most populated island in the country. This is where Jakarta, their capital, is. But we didn't want to do the big city thing, and so we picked a smaller city, and that is Yogyakarta. This is a really historically rich city, not quite as big as Jakarta, but still a pretty big city, especially compared to like Honolulu. And while we're in Yogyakarta, we spent most of our time looking at historical landmarks. There's some really cool 8th and 9th century temples there. And then, of course, we also spent a lot of time doing some shopping and checking out the local food. And we also had a great time in Jogja, but it was a completely different vibe than what we were seeing on Bali. And it makes sense because they're completely different cultures. They even have their own different native language. And so in Bali, it's primarily Hindu and Buddhist, so the artwork is reflective of that. And then on Java Island, where Yogyakarta is, it is predominantly Muslim. And so because of that, the art style and even the food is going to be different as well. Either way, we had a really great time in both locations, but if you are going to Indonesia for the first time, I would recommend going to Bali just because there are more people there that speak English. I used a lot of my Indonesian in Yogyakarta too as well. It was a lot of fun, but all the same, if you don't speak the language, it might be a little bit harder. After that, we decided to go to a different country and we picked Singapore. There's a few reasons for that. Number 1, we had already been there a bunch of times. I had been there about a dozen times already in my travels in the Navy, but my wife used to be a flight attendant, and so she had been there before too. But we had never been there together, and so that's where we decided to go. Additionally, they speak English as one of their primary languages there, and so it's pretty easy to get around. But then also they speak Malaysian as one of their official languages, which is very similar to Indonesian, so it's very easy for me to get around in that country too. And then finally, from a logistical standpoint, it's very easy to get to Singapore from Hawaii. You just have to basically go and travel through Japan. And so because of that, it just makes it really easy to travel through Singapore. And so that was the 3rd reason why we decided to go there. And so we ended up spending about 4 or 5 days there as well. And this was really awesome. We mostly did like food related things just because because the food there is so good. They have like these open air markets, they call them like hawker stands. And so we went to a lot of these food courts and just tested out a bunch of the local foods, things like chili crab. But then also, we ate some fruits like durian, which is one of those more iconic fruits coming out of Singapore and Indonesia. And then just, also doing a lot of those indoor malls. They have a ton of those there in Singapore, and they have some really great food courts there as well. And then also like the shopping in Singapore is just kind of amazing. They have so many different stores and different places that you can go, but it's kind of funny too, but a lot of the stores that you can find on the mainland US that are not in Hawaii are also in Singapore. And so we were able to do some like US based shopping from there as well. And so we had a really great time in Singapore too. We did a lot of touristy things as well, just because it had been so long, about 15 years since either of us had been there. And so it was just kind of neat to see how much that city is built up. But we still did things like, going to the aquarium and checking out the Merlion statue, things like that. Anyway, we also had a great time in Singapore, although it was a lot hotter than I remember. In fact, it was about 10 degrees hotter than it is here in Hawaii, and this is a pretty warm state as well. And so we were just scorching most of the time, and so that's one of the reasons why we did a lot of indoor shopping just to get in the AC. And really, that's about it when it comes to this section. I just want to talk about the places we had gone and just kind of the travel and getting there. So now I want to talk about the handhelds and the other electronic devices that I brought and why. Number one, we tried to pack as light as we could, and so because of that, we really just kind of focused on having everything in one backpack. This included our electronic devices as well as like a jacket while we were on the plane, and then snacks and stuff like that. And so to start, I only wanted to bring one big ticket item, and that was going to be the GPD WinMax 2. This is a small laptop handheld device that I had reviewed a couple weeks before we had actually gone on our trip. And so the idea here was that because it can function as a laptop, I can do like work laptop-y things on it, but then also if I wanted to play games on it, I could do that as well. Now in my WinMax 2 review, I had mentioned that playing that device in handheld mode was kind of a compromised experience, just from the fact that it's kind of big and unwieldy and kind of flat. And so I did have a couple mitigations in place. Number one is I brought a Bluetooth controller with me. I have this one here. It is the 8BitDo SN30 Pro. This came out, a couple months ago, the green model here at least. And so I wanted to use this one instead, just to be able to play on that big 10-inch screen without having to actually use the controls on the WinMax 2. It's kind of cheating, but all the same, it just made a lot of sense because this is so small. But in reality, I ended up not really playing this at all, even with the controller, and part of that was my own doing in the fact that I brought my Steam Deck with me. This was a very last-minute decision, but basically as I was packing, I was like, I wonder if there is space for the Steam Deck as well. And so yes, I ended up just cramming the Steam Deck in my backpack, and yeah, it fit, and it was probably one of the best decisions I made because that's probably what I played the most. And really, I only focused on two different games. Number one was Hades. This was a game that I already beat around this time last year, but it's one of those games where if you keep beating it, it'll unlock more and more story. And so I just kind of kept going with it. I haven't unlocked the whole game yet. I think I've beat it about 8 times altogether, but I think you have to beat it about 10 just to be able to get everything unlocked. In addition, one of my goals while on vacation was to beat Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom via emulation on the Steam Deck. And so this is a game I was probably about 2/3 of the way through already, but I just wanted to finish that up. And this is one of the reasons why I favored the Steam Deck over the WinMax 2 as well. Even though the WinMax 2 can play that game absolutely no problem, the drivers for the 7000 series, the chip that is on the WinMax 2, hadn't officially been released yet, and so because of that, there were a bunch of graphical glitches when trying to play that game. And on the Steam Deck, it actually played really well, although it did have a lower frame rate. And so because of that, I decided, you know what, I'd rather play on the Steam Deck with better graphics and a lower frame rate. And so that was one of the main reasons why I brought the Steam Deck too. And I should also mention that I didn't spend a ton of time actually playing games on this vacation. It was really just like during the flights, especially my connections through like Japan and then throughout Indonesia. And so because of that, I did have some opportunities here and there, but it wasn't something that I was like spending hours on while on vacation playing. It was more like just when I had a little bit of downtime and then during those flights. Now, another thing I had learned in previous travels with it, yes, even though bringing the Steam Deck or something like WinMax 2 is going to be a great idea, all the same, it's not going to be the best and most convenient thing to pull just when you have a few minutes to spare. And so because of that, I did want to bring a smaller device, and this time I decided to bring the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. Now, this wasn't my first choice when it came to devices. In fact, I was going to bring the Anbernic RG405M, and that's because this device is a lot more small and compact, but then also it has a new software suite on it called Gamma OS. I made a video about it recently. recently. And so because of that, I just wanted to test that a little bit more. And I thought it'd be a lot of fun, especially because with that Gamma OS, you can get really great battery life, up to 20 plus hours. Now, there were two reasons why I ended up not bringing the RG405M. Number one is the fact that it's metal, and it just didn't make sense to travel around with a metal handheld, especially on my backpack, which was already kind of heavy with the other things inside. And the other reason why I ended up not bringing the RG405M on travel kind of surprised me, and that was because I wanted to earn retro achievements, but because we were traveling around so much, I knew I wasn't going to have internet connection, and so because of that, I ended up deciding that I didn't want to actually play those retro games. There's many reasons why you would actually want to play those games. For example, it's going to have a great battery life, you have that 4-inch screen, 4:3 aspect ratio, so there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to play things like Nintendo and Super Nintendo games. But all the same, I also wanted to earn those retro achievements. And so as appealing as it was to bring that device, the fact that it was so heavy and the fact that I couldn't earn my retro achievements made me start to think about other options. And so that's why I ended up settling on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. Number one, it is made out of plastic and more lightweight, but then also it has a wider aspect ratio, which makes it better for certain systems. In particular, PlayStation Portable and Nintendo Switch emulation are really great on this little device, and those two actually happen to not have retro achievements set up for them either. And so this ended up being a win-win situation for me. I had a lightweight plastic device that I could bring with me with that widescreen format that was going to work out really well for PlayStation Portable and lightweight Nintendo Switch games. Most of the time I ended up playing Celeste. This is a game I play all the time, but I just really love playing through those first levels over and over again. It's just a really fun experience. And so that's what I ended up doing when I had a few minutes to spare. I could just pull this out of the backpack, take the 3D printed case off of it, and then just go ahead and play a few levels of Celeste right then and there. And so when it came to the games that I played and the devices I played them on, that's what I ended up deciding. Now, the other aspect that I wanted to talk about is traveling with these actual devices and the other things I had to bring in terms of accessories. For example, here's my cable case holder thing. I've had this thing for years, and it's probably not the most practical thing. You can probably find better things out there, but it's the one I already have, and so because of that, this is what I ended up using. Now, this one has two different compartments. The top one here is where all my cable management goes, and so I have just a bunch of different cables, things to be able to charge my phone and my watch, but then also my various gaming devices, and then also like my Bluetooth headphones. Additionally, I brought a small mouse with me just so that I could use that with the WinMax 2. I ended up not taking this out at all, but it is nice in the fact that it's really thin, and so because of that, it just packed really well. Now, the bottom compartment is where all the fun stuff is. So on the left, I have my Bluetooth headphones. I ended up using this mostly on the plane. And then on the far right side, I have my 8-bit DO controller, but then also a large battery pack. This ended up coming in clutch when it came to playing on an airplane. For example, on my flight from Honolulu to Japan, there wasn't a plug on the bottom of our seats, and so because of that, I had to rely on battery life. And as you can imagine with the Steam Deck, playing something like Nintendo Switch emulation, especially Tears of the Kingdom, can eat through that battery pretty quick. You usually get a little bit less than 2 hours of gameplay. But the nice thing about this battery pack is that it has a lot of juice inside, and so I can charge up the Steam Deck about 1.5 times altogether. And so in combination with the internal Steam Deck battery, but then also this battery pack, I was able to play that thing for about 6 hours altogether in that flight from Hawaii to Japan. Now, in other flights, I did have a plug in the bottom of my seat, and so because of that, it didn't really make that much of a difference. But for those flights where I had to rely on the battery, it was actually really handy. Now, when it came to a power plug, I ended up only bringing one, and it was this one here from Ugreen. This is a 140 watt power plug. And this one's great because it can charge the Steam Deck at full speed, but then also the WinMax 2, and so it can work as a laptop charger as well as on the Steam Deck. And of course, obviously, it can do things like charging my phone and watch and all that other kind of stuff. And because it has 3 plugs, I can charge many things at once. Now, this thing has a US plug on it, and I realized that there were going to be other plugs in these other countries, so I did bring a travel adapter. But it turns out in all of our hotels, they had this other universal plug that you could plug basically anything inside. And so even though Indonesia uses like the European style dual plug, and then also Singapore uses the UK style plug, I didn't have to worry about the conversion at all because there was a place for me to actually put the US plug inside. So even though I did bring this travel adapter, I ended up not using it at all, which is kind of neat. I would still recommend using it if you are going to be traveling overseas, just in case there isn't something like that for you. But all the same, I was surprised to find that in each of our hotels, we did have that option. Now, when it came to actually transporting the handhelds themselves, for the WinMax 2, all I did is just put it in the laptop compartment of my backpack, so super easy to slide that in and out. And then for the Steam Deck, I decided to use my water-filled case. There was a couple reasons for that. Number one, this one has a magnetic clasp to it, and so it's really easy to to open it up and pull the Steam Deck right out. In addition, it does have a couple small compartments inside, so I was able to put a microfiber cloth inside there, and then also a kickstand attachment for my kill switch case. And so that way I was able to prop it up on the tray table of the airplane seat, and so that just made it a really more comfortable experience. And so yeah, that's just a really quick overview of how I packed everything up. I had all my cables within that cable management case, as well as things like my battery and power plug. And then the Steam Deck had its own case, and I really benefited from the fact that I didn't have to use a bunch of zippers. I could just pull that right out. Okay, so now I want to talk about all the things that arrived while I was gone. Now I have a whole stack of things here that I need to review, but the idea here is I'm going to show them all off, and then you can tell me in the comments below which one you would like me to review first. But I do have to say that the first one's already been decided, and that's going to be this one here. This is the 1X Player 1X Fly. Now this is a device that actually I saw tracking in its shipping, and I was like, oh man, this might actually arrive before I leave and I could take it with me, but it ended up delivering like 3 hours after I had already left. And this one's pretty exciting. This is a smaller handheld, but with a really nice chip inside, but then also it has a 120 Hz refresh screen. And we haven't seen that on any other device other than the Asus ROG Ally. And so I'm really excited to get my hands on this one. What I'm planning on doing here is just doing a quick first impressions, just get a feel of the device itself. And then when the Indiegogo campaign goes live, I'll do a full review. And so be on the lookout for that video. It'll probably be coming out later on this week. Now the next one I want to show off here is actually one I've already reviewed. This is the AYN Loki Max. Now this is a device that I actually got as a review unit, and I did an impressions and review video on it. But this is the one that I paid for, so this is the retail copy. So I do want to do a comparison between the retail and the review unit. This one's also a different color, and so I'm pretty excited to check this one out. This is the white version. Another device that's pretty exciting is this one here. This is the Aya Neo Air 1S. So this is an updated chipset for the Aya Neo Air device. So I'm going to probably already know what's going to be coming out with this when it comes to the hardware itself, but when it comes to performance, this should be really interesting. And so I am looking forward to testing this one out, and let me know in the comments if you want me to test this one out next. Another device that I got in the mail is this one here, the Powkiddy RGB10 Max 3 Pro. I don't really remember what color I bought of this, but we can test this one out as well. This is a clone of the Odroid Go Ultra, and that's a device I'd already reviewed on this channel, but I had some issues with its hardware. And so this will be really interesting to see how Powkiddy was able to improve upon it. Now, the other thing about this is it can be a Linux-based device, and so because of that, you can run Jealous on it. And so that's what I'm probably going to end up doing on this. And so I am really looking forward to this because it is going to be a powerful Linux handheld, something that we've been waiting quite a long time for. Another really neat thing about this one is the price is pretty low. I think it's like $115 altogether, and so I think that's really reasonable, and it's a pretty exciting device. Anyway, let me know if you want me to test this one next. Now, the next thing I got in the mail is this little mini PC right here. I don't even know what brand it is. I bought it on AliExpress, and I think it was around $150. But the thing that's exciting about this one is that it uses a particular chipset called the N100. And this is found in a lot of different mini PCs, but it works pretty well for retro game emulation, at least from what I've heard. And so what I'm hoping is this could be a really great budget-minded mini PC, and not necessarily this mini PC itself, but just any that use this chipset. And so I want to do a bunch of testing with this chip, and let me know in the comments below if you want me to test this one out next. Now, the last thing I got in the mail is not a handheld device or even a mini PC, but a game. This is a game called Astro from a company called Neofid Studios. Now, this is an official press pack, and the reason why I got it is because about maybe a year or two ago, there was another game that this company had made called Demons of Astaborg, and I tested it out on my channel because it runs on the Sega Genesis. And so because of that, you can buy the Steam copy and then run it on emulators, and so I thought that was really cool. So I made a whole video about it, and I think I got on their mailing list. And so because of that, I ended up getting this press pack for their new game. I actually bought the game already on Kickstarter, and I've been playing it. It's a really fun roguelike game, and it works on the Sega Genesis as well. So I'm really excited to test this out because I think it's going to have like the full Sega Genesis cartridge inside. So let me know if you want to test this one out as well. Anyway, that's about it for this video here. I just wanted to show off where we went on vacation, and then also all the things I brought with me and why, and how that all kind of fell out when it came to practical use. And then finally, I wanted to show off the things I'm going to be working on. So let me know in the comments below which things you want me to test first. As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.